behind the thing. My name is Efrain Peña. If you do not know that, if you're watching online, my heart and prayer is that God will take you on an incredible journey today and inspire you and encourage you to do things differently than how you came in, to live a life differently. And so last week we kicked off our summer series, The Thing Behind the Thing. And this series is really about the understanding that everyone is not the same, right? That some people can go through almost identical situations, but read and react to them differently in different ways. You see, there's something deep inside of each other's responses, each other's thinking, and this, the main part of this is, where's that coming from? Why do we think differently? Why do we react to things differently? What's the thing behind the thing? Listen, there's something deep inside each and every one of us driving everything that we do. And the goal is to find out what that is. The goal is to find out what is our primal question, right? And can we get that answered with a yes? And how we can use that to leverage that to help us, not hurt us, right? Last week, I asked you guys to take an assessment test, right? We put up the QR code on the screen there, and I told you to scan it and take this simple, under 5-minute assessment that will give you your primal question. Now, based on the first wave of the question that I asked, we asked this earlier in our group volunteers who actually signed up or did the question. I don't think many hands went up. So I'm not going to hurt myself or hurt my feelings, right, and put myself in that situation and ask that question again. I just want to highly and strongly encourage you to please scan that and take the assessment. And here's why it's important, because if you do not know what your primal question is, the rest of this series is going to be difficult. You won't know what we're actually talking about. You won't understand, like, how's that relevant? How does that pertain to me? And so it's super important. It's, like I said, it's 5 minutes. In fact, I encourage you to do everyone in your family to take this. So far in my family, there's 4 of us that have taken it. We have 2 more to go, and they'll do that today. And I think we have found out that so far 4 of us have 4 different primal questions. And I think by the end of it, there might be 6 primal questions, only leaving 1 that has not been asked. So I want you, it's highly, highly recommended for this series, but it's highly recommended for yourself, because I've taken this assessment and I've been asking questions to myself, trying to figure out like how this is all play out, because it's so spot on, right? So I want to encourage you to take this assessment. And so today, if you took the assessment and this is the first one for you, this is great. If you didn't take the assessment, you're going to hear it, and then you're going to realize, we talked about it today. So today, we're going to be addressing the first primal question, which is, am I safe? All right, am I safe? And I already know one person whose assessment came out to that question. That's their primal question. I don't know if there's anyone else, right? So they're going to feel like all I'm talking about is that person, right? And but it's going to be incredible. So anyone ever grow up with overly protective, cautious parents? Just raise your hand. Not wanting you to get hurt. I did. Like, I can never do nothing because my mom was always on watch. Like, she said, you can go outside, but you have to be within eyesight. I'm like, I can't even hide under the car for hide and go seek. Like, she was persistent on it. Like, we lived on a block, right? A block is a bunch of buildings that are lined in a street in the middle, and I could only go to the end of the block or to that end of the block because she stood on the windowsill like this, and her head could go to the left and to the right, and she could only see to the extremities of that particular block. So every time that I went to the back, like, I could feel her eyes just on the back of my head, like she's gonna call me out, and she would yell. And I'm not going to tell you what my middle name is because that's what she would yell, my middle name. And everybody knew it was me. And I'd be like, I can't do nothing, right? And I couldn't just leave. I was like, I'm going to the store, to the bodega. Like I just want a bag of chips or something. That's when the chips were a quarter, right? Now they're like $1.50 for the one I paid a quarter. And you get like 3 chips. In fact, Monica got a bag of chips with nothing in it. Anyway. And so she was just overly protective of me. She didn't want me playing with the hands. Like, boys wrestle. Like, we like slap box. And she was like, no, you're going to get hurt. I'm like, Mom, I'm bigger than these little midgets. I can smack these guys with my pinky toe. But no, you couldn't play with your hands, right? It didn't matter to her. She was always protecting me, right? We've all have probably somehow experienced this in our lives to some degree. And it was almost as if what was being communicated to us was that no matter what we do, the world that we live in is not a safe place. And I'll be honest this morning, as a dad of 4 beautiful, lovely young ladies, right? Who I love with all of my heart, I'm guilty of doing the same thing to them. I'm guilty of like, hey, be safe. Like that's like comes out just automatic. Like I could be watching the Yankees play, yeah, be safe, right? It just comes out. It's just something that parents do, right? But here's the thing. For some of us, it wasn't that our parents were overly cautious. Maybe it was that they were disengaged to a certain extent, which caused you to feel some kind of neglection. For others, it was probably the environment where there was violence, abuse, or addiction was present. But whatever your experience might have been, it may have left you as a child and now as an adult wondering, am I safe? Am I safe? And maybe you find yourself asking these questions consistently, right, in various situations or relationships. Now, again, today we're addressing this primal question, number 1, am I safe? And you're probably here, but like, that's not my primal question. But you're going to see, because you might come across someone whose primal question is 1 and why they think and do, right, the thing behind the thing. And so their questions are similar in this fashion. They're asking, will I be okay? Am I protected? Is everyone in life against me? Will I be able to survive? And now with all of these questions kind of looming around you, it creates this high amount of stress and anxiety and an overactive, fear-based mind in you. You find yourself being hyper-vigilant, living in a world of worst-case scenarios, right? When your child doesn't come home on time, you imagine every worst-case scenario, from accidents to abductions. When facing a performance review, you worry about every minor mistake that you have made, fearing that it will lead to you losing your job. Before a trip, you anticipate every possible travel mishap that could take place, from lost luggage to a delayed flight, and can't shake the feeling that something might go wrong. When you feel a minor ache, you immediately jump to the worst conclusions, researching symptoms online and fearing a severe illness is at hand. You aren't asking these questions because you are curious, and you aren't asking, or you aren't living in a world of worst case scenarios because as a child, that's what you dreamt of for your life. No, nobody does that. But you find yourself where you are because of what you have experienced, how life has played out thus far for you. Like we talked about last week, as kids, we all had emotional needs for things. And maybe for you, the physical and the emotional safety you needed wasn't there. Maybe it was the stability wasn't there. So what sets in is a core of fear, of experiencing pain, not being able to survive, or figure it out. Thus, you go through life avoiding risks and keeping people at an emotionally and physically safe distance from you. But what if a safe environment isn't a luxury? What if it's a fundamental requirement of growth for you to experience that growth? If it is, then how do we continue to be able to experience this deep relational connection that God has desired, has created for us to have with him, right? And desires us to experience in order to grow. There's a person in the Bible that we're going to be referencing today that kind of speaks into this. Joseph, not Jesus's father, but Joseph is someone in the Bible who is probably asking all of those questions and more as he journeys through life. Questions like, will I be okay? Am I protected? Is everyone in life against me? Will I be able to survive? So let's quickly run through his story and talk about how we can experience the deep connection that God wants for us in order to grow. So let's start off with the imprint, right? The imprint is what was engraved from the start, how it all began. How did Joseph get to this point of having this primal question, am I safe, right? You see, Joseph lived in Canaan with his father Jacob and his brothers. He had quite a few of them. And his dad favored him above the rest, over his siblings, up to the point where his dad even gave him this nice little fancy coat or robe. His brothers hated him because of that, because he was favored. Then Joseph brought a bad report about his brothers to their father, and he also shared dreams with his dad that he had with his family, where he saw himself in a position of power and authority over them. This made things worse for him, and it fueled the jealousy and the resentment even further amongst him and his brothers. Joseph's brothers go off to take care of their father's sheep, and Joseph's father sends Joseph to his brothers to go find them. And Joseph goes around looking for his brothers, and a man tells him that his brothers have moved on to another town, one where his dad had told him to go. So in Genesis 37:17 and 19, it goes, so Joseph followed his brothers to Dothan and found them there. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. And as he approached, they made plans to kill him. They said, here comes the dreamer. Here comes the dreamer. Now, it seems like their jealousy and their resentment towards Joseph has been something that has been kind of building up over an extended period of time. That maybe there were other things that he had done, there were other things that they had done to Joseph from that place of hurt. Them being hurt by their father doesn't seem to love them as much as he loves Joseph. But for Joseph, I could imagine him looking to his older brothers as people who are there. They're there because they're supposed to keep him safe. They're supposed to protect him. But it seems that what he's experiencing is anything but that safetiness, but that protection. Genesis 37:21 and 24 tells us that there's a plot to kill Joseph. And then one of the brothers, Reuben, right, he's one of the brothers, tries to talk some sense to the other brothers who want to kill him and convinces them to kind of simply just put him in a cistern, right? Throw him into the wilderness. Reuben's plan was to eventually kind of go and rescue him out of the cistern. Verses 26 and 28, they kind of changed their mind and they did sell him into slavery. They sold their brother into slavery, right? The brothers were overcome by compassion. No, they weren't, right? And they decide, instead of kill him, let's sell him into slavery. All of this kind of heightens and affirms the primal question is, am I safe? That was imprinted onto Joseph as a child. Though most primal questions are imprinted by our parents, some can be imprinted by others within our family system. And in Joseph's case, it was his brothers. When this emotional and physical need for safety goes unmet, Joseph's primal question is answered with a no. Am I safe? No, you are not. And that sends him into kind of a scramble. And we're going to see how this scramble kind of plays out in three different ways, right? The first way is he becomes hypervigilant, right? Genesis 39, 6-20. Verse 6 tells us that with Joseph in charge of it all, Joseph, like we fast forward into life, and Joseph goes through slavery and he gets picked out, right, to be in charge of things. Potiphar didn't have to worry about anything because Joseph was on top of things. It also tells us that Joseph was highly observant and cautious and meticulously attending and managing his duties in order to avoid any mistakes that could lead him back to feeling of unsafe or not being protected. He was hypervigilant. Right? This is defined as an elevated state of constantly assessing potential threats around you. When we read that story, we can see, man, he was doing an incredible job. But if you dig a little bit deeper and understand that his primal question was, am I safe? Yes, he's doing a great job, but it's really what he's doing is being extra cautious because he doesn't want to feel unsafe anymore, right? And so it tells us that Joseph, he was hypervigilant, and so he's continually assessing the threats around him. This is what made him a great asset to those around him. But in Potiphar's house, it wasn't centered around the safety for others. He wasn't doing it to protect others. He was doing it to protect himself for his safety. The second way this plays out, the scramble, is that there's control issues. Worst case scenarios present. That person is always thinking about worst case scenarios. Genesis 41, 46-49. Joseph's roles in managing the resources of Egypt during the famine shows his need for control. And through thorough planning, like he thought out these things. He thought out the worst case scenarios of what could happen if he didn't do this or if they made a mistake. Right? He thought out these worst case scenarios in order to ensure safety for himself. And lastly, in the scramble, there's a caution in relationships. Genesis 42, 7-8. Joseph, now being the governor of the land, the one in charge of selling the grain, recognized his brothers when they came in. Tells us that his brothers came looking, and he saw them, and he chooses to test his brothers before revealing his identity to them. He was keeping them at an emotionally and physically safe distance to ensure that he would not get hurt again. Friends, everything that we see Joseph experience throughout his journey thus far tells us that when our safety is in question, our best selves are compromised. When we don't feel safe, we cannot live the life that God has purposed us to live, the good life. And thus, primal avoidance comes about. And this is when we avoid situations or feelings that threaten our sense of safety. Oh, I'm not going. That's not going to be good. Oh, I'm not doing that. That's. I'm not going to feel safe. I don't like that. This don't make me feel uncomfortable. I don't feel protected, and so we now start avoiding situations. We start avoiding people. Maybe for you, this plays out in shying away from confrontational situations or discussions to prevent potential disagreements or arguments that could threaten feelings of emotional safety or stability. Maybe it's insisting on strict routines and schedules to minimize unpredictability and to maintain a sense of control over daily life and surroundings. I want to have the say. I want to make the decision. Maybe it's refusing to attend large events or crowded places to avoid that overwhelming feeling of being surrounded by unknown individuals. For Joseph, it was about avoiding vulnerability in his relationships, relying on his own abilities and his own efforts and his own strength and maintaining control. We all do these things to avoid situations or feelings that threaten our sense of safety. This makes it nearly impossible to move out of our comfort zone in order to continue to grow and live out this life that God has purposed for us. But what changed for Joseph? How did he move beyond being overly cautious in different areas of his life to experience the connection that he wanted? How did Joseph move his primal question into a primal truth? I believe that Joseph chose to leverage the relationship that he realized that he was always protected. Right? He chose to leverage the relationships that were around him that made him feel like he was protected. He knew that it would help him grow. Listen, when you're tempted to be overly cautious, remind yourself that leveraging community to move out of your comfort zone is how you grow. Leverage your relationship with God. Leverage your relationship with the people that love you. And use that to your advantage. Not by pulling yourself away. Not by retreating to yourself. Not by having this strong, I'm going to do it on my own because nobody's on my side. But realizing that people that love you and care for you, that the creator of heaven and earth is for you, that he is on your side. You see, Joseph chose to leverage his relationship with God to move out of his comfort zone, to move past being overly cautious, to move past self-reliance, to move past avoiding risks all the time, and to move forward recognizing that he is indeed safe. If he takes a step back, he can see that throughout everything that God has had, throughout everything that he has gone through, that God has had a plan for him, a purpose for him, and most importantly, that God protected him. Even after being sold into slavery, Joseph continued to take the risk of interpreting dreams, the things that his brothers hated the most, and it helped him rise to prominence, to a high level in Egypt. And as a leader in Egypt during the famine, Joseph had to learn how to rely on his community and their trust in him to implement a strategy that saved many lives. This required him to step beyond his comfort zone and to take bold actions for the greater good of others. Genesis 45, 5-8 tells us that he shared with his brothers that God has a plan. One of the things that marked Joseph's life was his faith that God had a purpose, a plan, and that he protected him. Despite all of the mishaps, despite all of the troubles, despite all of the craziness that has transpired in Joseph's life, he was leveraging his relationship with God to continue to meet his need. Genesis 50:20, he tells them that what was meant to harm him, God purposed to be a blessing. What the enemy was trying to do to cause harm, God turned it around into a blessing. This shows Joseph's recognition and acknowledgement of God's overarching plan and protection over his life. Joseph was able to realize that God did not create him to live from a place of fear. He didn't create us either, church, to live from a place of fear. In verse 15 to 21, Joseph forgives his brothers. Look at what Joseph tells his brothers in verse 19. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And in verse 21, have no fear. Remember what I said last week. What we need is often what we become equipped to give away to others. Think about that. What we need is often what we've been equipped to give away to others. Joseph, in his most healthiest, best authentic version of himself, is dedicated to creating physical and emotional safety for others, even though his primal question was, am I safe? People with the primal question, am I safe, give away to others the gift of safety. They are the protectors of the world, working diligently to bring help and healing to hurt and frightened people. I'm going to wrap this up this morning. What if, like Joseph, you started, if this is your primal question, what if you started to leverage your relationship with a God who desires nothing more than to protect you? What if you decided to say, man, sometimes I have this feeling of not being safe, but God, in my relationship with him, will protect me. And how can I use that and leverage that to be a blessing to others? I love how David writes about God protecting us. Psalm 18, 2-3 talks about he is our refuge, right? The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my Savior. My God is my rock in whom I find protection. He is my shield, the power that saves me, and my place of safety. I called on the Lord, and who is worthy of praise, and he saved me from my enemies. Psalms 46, 1-2. He is my help in trouble, right? God is our refuge and our strength, always ready to help in times of trouble. So we will not fear when earthquakes come and the mountains crumble into the sea. Psalms 55, 16 and 17, he will save me. But I will call on God and the Lord will rescue me. Morning, noon, and night, I cry out in my distress and the Lord hears my voice. If your primal question is, am I safe? I want to tell you this morning, you are safe. He is your protector. He is your provider. He is your rescue. And as you allow God to answer your primal question with a yes, what if you then started to leverage a faith community like this, the local church, to help you continue to move out of your comfort zone and continue to grow in your walk? If this is your primal question, am I safe? Here's what I want you to do this week. Here's your homework. Write down 3 statements that help you define what living in your primal truth looks like. For example, right, I could only imagine that this is how it played out for Joseph in these 3 statements, right? I need to continue to trust in God's overarching plan and protection. I need to cultivate and maintain secure, trusting relationships with people that I can trust. I need to take risks that help me move beyond what I am currently comfortable with. I believe that those were the 3 statements that would have helped Joseph. The 3 truths, right? Now, I know all of this can sound cray-cray. I know all of this can sound frightening and intimidating and definitely make you uncomfortable. But here's a question to consider. What people in your life right now need you to move from your primal question to living your primal truth, to create physical and emotional safety from them? The people in this world that are hurting and need healing, need the gift that God has created you to bring to this world. That's safety. God has put people in your life for you to go from your primal question to your primal truth, so that you can help them step out and find that safety. You see why taking this assessment is so important? Because some of you be like, is that my primal question? Is that me? Because I just want to cry right now. I want to help somebody. Take the assessment. Next week, primal question is, am I secure? If you need to go through this again, you can watch it online. But I want to encourage you, this is going to be an incredible, powerful series for you. Understanding what is your primal question, how to get that yes from the Lord, walk in that primal truth, and see how that benefits the world around you. Amen. Let's pray.
Church, I just want to take a moment and say thank you for watching our service online. Whether you're watching it for the first time or you're watching it again because you enjoyed the service so much from the weekend, I'd like to take a moment and dive into our giving. Every week we give people the opportunity to give back and give to the local church so that God can continue to bless your lives and bless your finances. Here at South Hills, we believe that everything comes from God. We believe that He's the one that chose us and brought us into this world, gave us our gifts and talents and abilities. And I just want you to know that when we give, we are giving back what God has already given to us. If you've ever seen any of our envelopes at a South Hills campus, you'll see on there that it says, every week at South Hills, your generosity is giving people the opportunity to live a better story. And there's a scripture on there in Matthew chapter 6, verse 21 that says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So I want to encourage you today to click down below and set up your giving, whether it's for the first time or whether you're doing reoccurring giving. We have 4 ways to give here at South Hills. 1, you can do it in person at any of our campuses through an envelope. Or 2, you can actually text any amount that you would like to 84321. And the 3rd way is to download our Church Center app. I encourage you to do this one because the Church Center app gives you opportunity to stay connected with our church and your campuses. It's a great tool and resource for you to know what's going on. And the 4th way to give is to give online. You can go to southhills.org/give and you can set up your giving there. Whether you're a guest of our church or whether you are a member of our church, or whether you simply just like to watch our services, I encourage you to trust God with your finances so that He can bless and anoint your finances, and you can be trusting God in this journey of living life to the fullest. I love you, and thank you for watching our online service today.